Thank you. Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Wingspace and welcome to the Women of Color Designers series. This series is part of Wingspace's virtual salon programming, organized by Mei Ann and Elizabeth Mack, me. This roundtable series celebrates the artistry and vision of women of color designers within various disciplines. Some of you may have joined us for our costume design salon in August, and this is part 2 of the series with these incredible sound designers joining us. Tosin, Espii, and Kacie, and Mei Ann joining us as moderator. I'm going to start off by introducing myself and my pronouns and where I'm calling in from. And then I'll invite the rest of our panelists tonight to also introduce themselves. So I'm Elizabeth. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in on Lenape land in Jersey City. And oh yes, and thank you, Christine. Christine has just put a live transcription via Otter in the chat for anyone that would like live transcription. I'm gonna pass it off to Mel.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Mel Ung, she, her pronouns. I'm a Wingspace member and a costume designer. I'm calling in from Lenape land, also known as Manhattan. Before I pass it off to our wonderful panelists, I also want to mention that as we were putting together the salon, we received input and suggestions from Alicia Toop, another fabulous sound designer, while making our guest list. And I just want to say that I'm grateful for her contribution to this event. So now I'll pass it on to Tosin.
Hi, my name is Tosin Olufolabi. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a sound designer and deviser, and I am currently on Shakori land in North Carolina. I'm really excited to be here. And I will pass it on to Kacie.
Cool. Hi, everybody. I am Kacie Willis. Pronouns are she, hers, calling in from Muskogee land, which I just learned 10 minutes ago, in Georgia. And I am a sound designer, podcaster, producer, and happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I will pass it on to Sadah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sadah Espii Proctor, she, her, hers, or Espii. I'm a sound and video designer and VR director based in Lenape land in New York. Thank you.
And Mei Ann, do you want to hop on and say hi?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Mei Ann Teo. I use they and she pronouns, and I'm calling from Brooklyn and Lenape land. And I'll be moderating today.
Thank you, everyone. I'm really happy to have all of you here with us. Maybe Mel, do we want to talk a little bit about how the series came about?
Yeah. Do you want to? I can talk about it. We gave the spiel at our last salon, but for people that are new, Elizabeth and I can't even remember when, this was like months ago, but we came together and talked about doing a salon series to increase visibility and celebrate women of color designers, and to just create a space for us to share our work and also to share ourselves. And we initially had planned for just one salon, but obviously when we started putting down names of people we knew or people we didn't know but admired, we just realized that there were too many amazing women of color artists. So we decided to do one for each discipline. And this is our second in the series. We have 3 more next year for scenic, lighting, and projection, and stay tuned.
All right, tonight's structure will run as follows. We're gonna get our guest panelists to share their work or share themselves. And then afterwards, there'll be a roundtable discussion moderated by Mei Ann, and then there'll be an open Q&A.
So we're going to start with Tosin tonight. Hi, Tosin.
Hi, awesome, okay. Here we go. There's a little presentation. My name is Tosin Olufolabi. My pronouns are she, her, all things I said. I was going to just talk about 4 things I've worked on, 2 things I've worked on this year slash are working on right now, and then 2 things I've worked before and kind of go back and forth between sound designing and devising. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. I feel very fancy, not having control. I feel very powerful. Thank you so much for your help. Okay, so right now I am working on 2 detective audio dramas with the company We Happy Few. I am based in the DMV area, so a lot of the companies I will be talking about are in the DMV area. Loveday Brooke and the Mystery of the Dawn Daggers. We just released that right before Thanksgiving. And it was just this audio drama about a lady detective based off of a book that came out like kind of in the Victorian times. This reverend receives in the mail a picture of a dagger, and then he receives another picture of 2 daggers a couple days later, and then he hires this detective, this lady detective. They say lady detective a lot, which is why I'm saying it. To solve, like, because he thinks he's gonna die or someone's coming after him. And it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. There's a Sherlock Holmes version coming out in January. I actually put like the first scene in this PowerPoint just so we can listen to like the first 30 seconds of it or so. And so yeah, you can go ahead and play that.
I may have to stop share because I realized I didn't share my music. So 1 second, let me reshare. Share computer sound. Thank you. All right, let's try that again.
We Happy Few
Can you hear this?
Loveday Brooke in the Mystery of the Drawn Daggers.
Miss Helm?
Yes, Mr. Dyer?
Is the Lynch Court case archive finished yet?
Certainly not. I've only just started yesterday.
I remember you telling me that if I purchased you a typewriting machine, I'd see productivity and efficiency double in this office.
And you will see that, Mr. Dyer, if you look for it.
Huh.
But the typewriter is a machine, not a miracle.
What case are you working on now? Perhaps my help will hasten this.
Yeah, this was a really interesting experience just because it was kind of like my first time, designing without any kind of visual element at all, like all the information that the audience is getting is like auditory. So I definitely feel like it was a challenge in a different way, and I learned a lot of new things. We'll go to the next slide. The other thing I'm working on right now is with Rorschach Theater, and this is definitely kind of working my devising, side. They decided they actually brought me into the process a little bit later. So each month, the audience receive a box with like a map to go somewhere in DC and artifacts. And they'll like read letters or listen to something, and it's telling a story. So I wasn't there for the first 2 boxes. So I had to kind of play catch up, but it was kind of interesting to come into the process that way because I got to see what they had already created and kind of be a fresh perspective and be like, okay, this is where I think maybe we should expound on, or this is what, I was confused about, and so like, that was kind of fun to be that person in the process. And I've never really worked on something where like there was like a general map out, but not like really a specific ending. Like we're kind of working a bit as we go. We have like a general kind of map, but like there's the surprises coming along. And I know like we've had to adjust because since it's site specific, and where you go definitely relates to like how the story develops. Like I know that there were some places they wanted to have the audience go, but then they closed down because of COVID and things like that. So like we've been keeping things kind of open so we can be flexible and kind of change if we need to, and also depending on audience reactions. And what really like kind of caught my eye about this one when they asked me to join is that there was a quote that I definitely should have put in here. I apologize, I didn't. I'm gonna kind of butcher this quote. There was a quote that they were like based this show off of, which was someone said something like imagine there might be like, okay, there could be a device that we have not yet created, and if we create it, we would be able to hear sound waves throughout time. So like sound waves throughout time are happening constantly, and if we just had the right device, we'd be able to hear sound waves from the past and the future. And so like that's what inspired this show. I thought that was very interesting. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on now. We'll go to the next one. Okay, Schoolgirls, the African Mean Girls play at Roundhouse Theater. This is a show I'd sound designed, and it's a little just like close to my heart, just because the production team and the cast, we all got pretty close, and it's not often that as a Nigerian British American, like that you get to do a show about West African women just like being themselves on the stage. And so it was just a really special experience. I just put some music in there. You can play it just to get us in the mood if you want. It was very silly, but I was feeling very nostalgic when I made this slideshow of just some kind of like 80s Ghanaian music. It was really interesting researching because during the time, it was set in the 80s in Ghana, and during that time, there was a lot of war. There was like a civil war, and so either music was flourishing in the church and like gospel music, or it was like when people immigrated to like Germany. There's a lot of immigration to Germany, like the techno like music of the 80s mixing with Ghanaian music of the time. So like doing that research into what was going on, that was really interesting, and I really enjoyed that. Yeah. Oh, if that's not playing, that's fine. We can skip that. There it is. If you want to hear more of that, that artist's name is John K. John Jon-K, the letter K. You can find his stuff on YouTube. Okay, so my last show that I want to talk about was Peep Show. This was made by the company Dog and Pony DC. It was for the Women's Voices Theater Festival in DC. It was a devised show. It was the first show I had ever helped conceptualize, and then also worked through all the way to its production, you know, when we got the whole thing on its legs. So and the conceptualization, the like writing a bit of it, and I also sound designed it. So like it was just the whole process. So that was a challenging process, but I learned so much, and was kind of one of the bigger devising processes I've been like since earlier in my career, like when I had first started devising. Peep Show was essentially just like 5 spectacles. It all originated from conversations about objectification. but a lot more was kind of addressed in the show, from like intersectional feminism to like orgasms, and you know, it was just everything. And so I just have a little like trailer video, and we could just watch that, and you will see like glimpses of all 5 scenes.
No matter how woke, there's no exception. That's why this bullshit has yet to change.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'll say about Peep Show, which was also kind of challenging, was that we had the audience move around for each spectacle, and so like having to just like figure all that out in like this rehearsal hall. It was a lot of fun, and so that one's also like one I like to brag about a little bit, I guess. And that's it. That's everything.
Thank you so much, Tosin.
Thank you.
Applause. I love the range in your work, you know, sharing like a site-specific and a kind of more traditional play to this sort of like cabaret-ish thing. It's really awesome. And what you said about how, you know, sound really allows cultures to travel around the world, and music, it was like, oh yeah, that is a thing. Anyway, thank you so much. Our next person who's going to share work with us is Espii.
Hi, thank you. Excited to share with you all. Am I able to share from here, or should I just speak? Oh, okay, good. So, just one moment, please. So while I pull this up, actually, let me just do that one. There we go. Okay. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And cool. Okay. So hello everyone. My name is Espii. I'm a sound designer and a media artist. I do a lot of like soundscape, electronic composition. I also do video design, projection mapping, interactive audiovisual experiences, and I also work in virtual reality. Work I've shown nationally and internationally at festivals from South by Southwest to Tribeca to Beijing, Sheffield Doc Fest in the UK, and also an exhibition at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, Georgia. This is my favorite picture of my sound work, since oftentimes visual is hard to come by. But for me, sound is something that is visceral. Sound is something that causes sensations in the body. Sound for me is something that's always been tied to movement because of the way I came up in this practice. So I started out in performance, not necessarily as like in college, but just growing up. I did dance, hip hop, tap, jazz, house. I did physical theater, did device work in college. I also sang, and through that, just working on improvising and creating rhythms in music. So the way that I fell into sound design was through what's called the Linux Laptop Orchestra. That was at Virginia Tech. Well, it still is. It is a orchestra that at the time they utilized very small Linux laptops, the open source program PD for audio programming, and we used Wiimotes, the Wiimotes, the video game ones, to trigger sounds. And so for me, I joined this in an attempt to understand how multimedia storytelling works. So I wanted to do it as a practice in the orchestra, and then also there's a class going side by side. I ended up falling in love with it. It was really just to learn about how, and I ended up just becoming interested in the practice. A thing to know about the laptop orchestra is that each performer had their own hemispheric speaker, and they were all networked. So as we were triggering sounds and drawing out these shapes for an audience to be able to attach a visual to audio, the sound was also moving through the space. So for me, from the very, very beginning, sound, visuals, and movement were all tied together. There wasn't, it was a very holistic way of coming up in that. The Cube is a 4-story black box theater at Virginia Tech that was constructed with 150 speakers. So some years later, after I graduated, the space was finished, and I had a week-long residency there. And I got to work on one of my first original pieces called Preface of a Gray, which is based on a picture of Dorian Gray. And so I took the text from the preface and manifested a horror story out of it, of a person who created something that was meant to be beautiful, but it grew very grotesque, and they tried to hide it, and at the end it shattered, and they died. But this for me was it was a week where I got to play with so many different subwoofers that shook the audience, that they could feel it in their body, like when the monster's like trying to break out of the walls, and then the ceiling, when you can hear the glass shattering from the photo, and you can fit like it going from the ceiling to the walls and coming down. And so I was very interested in how the sound was moving through the space, as well as creating a wall of sound that grew in pressure over time until finally everything shattered. Audio dramas are where I am currently now. So I was a sound designer for This Is Where We Go, which was between Parsnip Ship and MCC Theater. 6-play radio play podcast series. And in addition to that, also collaborating with them as a sonic dramaturg for the Radio Roots Writers Group. So because of my background in both dramaturgy and sound design, my practice has been looking at how to, a holistic way in terms of how to create sound for audio experiences, and how to talk about audio in a way that writers can understand. So we've looked at what's called modes of listening, or different ways that sound can be interpreted. So whether that is a causal mode of listening, where you hear the siren and you immediately associate it with ambulance. Okay, the ambulance has the siren. And then you have a semantic form of listening, where siren is okay, panic, or siren is okay, that is something that is like danger, rushing. And then reduced, which is focusing more on the qualities of the sound. So talking about how it like comes in very loud and round, and then it comes back out very slowly and it trails away. So really talking about the characteristics of the sound itself, which can then be helpful for creating metaphors. Silt Verses is a collaboration with creators in the UK. So it's a horror fantasy series I'm doing sound design for. So I worked on the first 2 episodes. That has been a lot of what is the world of the play, and being able to what's the world of the play, and being able to create a vision with the director so that there's a consistency throughout the piece on like all the various locations and different tones and qualities that they have. The very iconic parts in this show, like the main character's car and whatnot. So in VR, I'm continuing to experiment, finding Pandora X, which was at Venice Film Festival, won the Golden Lion for Best VR Immersive Experience. And for that, I got to do site visit in VR. So that is actually that is me. That is the avatar that I chose for that day. That is me waving my hand at the director. And that's part of the set as it was being built. And so for VR, for specifically for theater, VR theater, what is been fascinating is being a part of the process in such an early stage, that it's, while we're building the world and adding the sounds and building the world and adding the sounds and finding ways to compromise with the whole team on what are the key elements that can be in the space. We were limited to like less than 10 cues for the show, like a full show, and we had 3 whole worlds. And so part of it, this is the scale of the world. So part of it was coordinating with other designers on what are essential sounds that we want to have in the world, and what are key things that cause a transition. And then what are other things that don't need sound, but we can trust that the audience will be able to suspend their disbelief with the additional design elements. So that is what I'm currently up to. So yes, I think the last slide dropped out, but it's okay. I'm just continuing to experiment in VR, continuing to do audio dramas, and finding ways within what is called social VR platforms to have audio-centric experiences that people can actually gather with their avatars and be able to be part of. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Espii. Thank you for taking us through your design dramaturgy process and articulating all of that. As a costume designer, I always work with the tangible, so it's always like a real treat when I get to hear other designers talk about processes that are so unfamiliar from mine. So thank you. All right, last but not least, Kacie.
Okay, let's multitask. All right, and we're clicking. Okay, share screen. Okay, oops. Okay, I think I'm doing it. So this is how we, and by we, I'm speaking on behalf of all of my crewmates and teammates at my company, Could Be Pretty Cool, somehow did things in 2020 that were art related And this is kind of like a haphazard year in review for some of the things that we did. So I found it could be pretty cool about this time last year. Honestly, I just, as an artist, as a professional, I got to a place where I felt ready to start branching out from just working for other companies and, you know, working on other people's projects. I was like, yeah, it's my time. I'm gonna do my own thing. So one of the first things that we did, this is from a podcast pilot session. We're going to get to that a little bit later. January of this year, at a studio. Nobody was there because everybody was still on holiday break. Just a lovely time with some creative folks in a studio palling around. The next sort of major endeavor that we undertook in January was the ATL Indie Theater Panel and Mixer. So I am largely introverted by nature, but if I'm around other like creative folks and folks who I know are, you know, probably just as introverted as I am, but able to talk about work, I feel a lot more comfortable and confident. And so because I know that that's how a lot of us are, I decided to put together a panel for us just to sort of talk about some of the issues that we were having as independent artists, some of the ways that we could come together more as a community. And for the first in-person event for Could Be Pretty Cool, it actually was a great success. That's back early in the year when we could be in rooms together and sit shoulder to shoulder, if you can even remember. But this was just such a great time to just be around folks and share our perspectives. February, I was a riding high. I had a full-time gig working in arts marketing. I was in rehearsal for 2 productions and in pre-production for a third. And the success of the ATL Indie panel, people were like, yo, we have to do this again. Like, that was cool. And so February, we were actually planning on a second event to sort of piggyback on the things that we learned from the first event and to really try to continue our networking and to work together on projects and to just, all these plans. We just had all the plans. So then March happened and April happened. I was laid off from my full-time job. All of the productions that I was working on, of course, had to shut down. And it was sort of like the, I guess, collective rug being pulled out from under us. This is not this is a pretty universal experience. But by May, you know, got out of my feelings. And by May, I really started turning to podcasting, which is, again, not uncommon for many of for the 2 presenters we've heard before me and for a lot of my theatrical and live sound design friends. Podcasting was a way to sort of pivot, to stay creative, to stay connected. And I'm really happy that I started to take it seriously. The January session was literally like, hey, a bunch of my friends, let's do this thing for fun. May, it turned into, okay, this might be all we have for a little bit. So let me show it a little bit more reverence. Here we are. So one of the first major podcast projects that Could Be Pretty Cool produced this year is a 3-part podcast series called White Angle. And so, as we all know, in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic that has sort of blanketed us this entire year, May, June, July, the summer uprisings caused so many conversations within the arts community, and the spark, I think, in our community, in the theatrical community. In the pre-show of this panel, I saw the We See You logo, like these conversations, these sort of unapologetic conversations were starting. And so I wanted to do something to contribute to, sort of what was going on. But the thing that I really latched on to as a result of everything that was going on is the fact that it was this footage, right? Starting with, the horrific footage of George Floyd here in Georgia, with both the Ahmaud Arbery and the Rayshard Brooks, is just like, we are just watching all of this footage. This footage is sparking revolutions. But I was also really curious about people who are taking that footage and using it to profit, using it to do, various things with it. What is sort of the mentality behind the folks who are making this footage into commercial work? And so White Angle paired a white documentary filmmaker who had made a film about Black trauma, either as a result of police violence or vigilantism, with a Black filmmaker. And it literally is just a platform for those folks to have a conversation. It ended up being way less terrifying, I hope for the guests, but certainly for me as a producer, than I expected it to be, because it just goes to show you, we are at a point where these conversations are so necessary that they don't seem as scary, if that makes sense. So very happy with this project. Feel free to check it out, whiteanglepod.com. Feedback, all that stuff, love it. So in January, you saw the sort of indoor in the studio podcast recording setup. Long story short, that particular podcast, because so much was sort of dead in so many industries, we ended up selling it, and we were able to get support to actually produce more episodes. But the problem was, we did not feel comfortable doing indoor recordings. You saw that space was tight. Even with, the protocols, I didn't feel comfortable having multiple guests coming in. So what we decided to do, Airbnbs were super cheap because nobody was going anywhere. So we rented an Airbnb out in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And we decided to build an outdoor podcast recording setup. So this is first night, that's the crew. First session, you can kind of see our setup. You may have seen the sort of stumps that they were building. Those ended up being the mic stands, because we had the mic arms and the microphones, but didn't think about how they were going to sit there until, the night before session was going to happen. So thankfully, I have a crafty crew who was able to hook those up, and they ended up being like a really cool prop. And so we've all probably heard this week, Tom Cruise yelling at folk on set for, not following social distancing protocols. While I typically do not advocate yelling and cursing at folk, because that's not necessary, being at the helm of an in-person production this year, I can kind of empathize, because you're terrified, right? I was terrified about everything but the actual recording at hand. We knew the gear, we knew the everything, the guests were great, talent was great, but the thought of someone coming on set and then leaving and getting sick or getting someone else sick was pretty much all that was like consuming certainly me. But fortunately, my crew was also very aware and very helpful in maintaining the rules, and we didn't have any problems from guests, which was great. We had very strict rules, even though we were outside, even though we were keeping distance, masks on until like right up until we do the session. As soon as we're done, put them right back on. But again, everybody was cool with it. And so that was kind of the vibe. We were there for 10 days. We didn't have to, but I wanted to record the entire season in that 10 days just because we had no idea what the state of the world was going to be. And I was like, we need to just get this all in the can. This is going to be grueling, but if we can just get it all on tape, then I'll feel a little bit better. So fortunately, again, troopers, folk were able to handle that. That's just a little night shoot for folks. I will say for sure that my training in theater and theatrical sound design was so useful in this setting, because when you're in a recording studio, you of course have that control. You have that control over the elements, you have the control over, your environment. But when you're, in someone else's house, or meaning, the house of a theater, there's still a sense of control, but it's not as there's still so much, as we all know, that can go wrong, that will go wrong, that needs fixing and works. And so having that sort of mentality in this type of setting was just invaluable, because all the things that went wrong, y'all, all of them, so many things. But we were able to figure them out. And so I can't talk too much about the show proper, but it is called You Heard Me Right. It will be launching sometime Q1 of, goodness, I'm saying Q1 like it's not 15 days from now. Y'all, this is such a humbling experience even to be speaking to you now. Just the way the year flew by is, wow, just realizing it in the middle of this presentation. But yes, we were able to get everything in the can, currently in a equally grueling post-production process right now, working remotely with my team, which, again, we're making it happen, but we're making it happen. And so feel free to, if you want to sort of keep in touch, or just follow to see what the progress is with the show whenever we're able to talk about it. Feel free. Yeah, that's what happened and how we somehow did things this year. The end.
Thank you so much, Kacie. I will definitely check out the podcast, and I just it's amazing what y'all pulled off, and I can't wait to listen to it. Okay, so now that all of you have shared your work with us, we're gonna move on to the roundtable discussion moderated by Mei Ann. And while Mei Ann is moderating, I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please send them to me via the private chat. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Mei Ann. And Mei Ann, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself too before you begin, that'd be great.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. And wow, what visionaries. I'm so excited to have this conversation with the three of you. I am a director, dramaturg, deviser, also a professor of directing at Carnegie Mellon, and the artistic director of Musical Theater Factory. I work at the intersection of artistic, civic, and contemplative practice, which I feel so much resonance with all three of y'all's work in all of the different forms and all of the different deep purpose and mission that your work is resonating with. And I'm just really excited to be here to talk to you. I'm going to start by asking the question, why sound? Why sound? If anybody wants to start it off, please do.
Sure, I guess I could jump in. For me, music has been such a key part of my life. My dad is a musician, and even though we didn't spend all of our time together, I grew up learning how to play piano from him. I took music lessons. playing violin, playing flute. And then later on, when I moved into dance, I went through a range of styles. I'm also an avid concert goer. I just love going to live shows. I just love the sensation of seeing people perform and just being in that space. And so for me, whether I'm shaping it or not, like sound, audio, hearing, like that's just such a huge part of my life. Realizing that I could shape sound in a way that can move and in a way that connects to the body for me was like, okay, this is a way that I could make this a part of my practice. I had no idea that it was a thing that people could do for a career. I just wanted to learn more about multimedia storytelling, and I ended up falling in love with the act of working in sound. So yeah.
I guess for me, similarly, I grew up, playing music, piano, guitar, eventually bass. But I specifically, there are two just kind of like childhood memories for me. We had a big stereo record player and cassette. Oh my goodness, a vinyl record player and cassette tape player. If y'all need to Google that, that's cool. And I can remember sitting in the living room and my dad would be playing music in the living room, either on the vinyl or the tapes. And what was so fascinating to me, if it was the vinyl, watching this thing spin around and somehow like the music was coming out of that, or if it was the tape, watching like the physical like tape roll from side to side. And I just couldn't figure out like, okay, there's, I have other objects in this house. They're not making music. How are these objects making music? And that was sort of, I guess, an early fascination, not just with, sound and music, but with the technology, even though I wasn't aware at all what the connection between that was. And so from just other experiences, at church, people letting me play on the board and mute and unmute the pastor's mic, to having friends who were making short films, like their college films, and letting me boom during their shoots. It was just like, I like all of this stuff. I don't know what it is or what it means, but yes, I want to do that. And that's essentially what is still happening today.
I feel like for me it's a similar thing that they both talked about. Was always interested in music, and loved just storytelling in all of its forms, right? And I remember like, I don't remember where I heard this, but like hearing someone say something about like when you don't have the words to express something, like sometimes like music can fill that, right? Like we can feel those things that we can't find the words to say, and like share that with another person. And like, I just love that quality. And I just wanted to contribute to that. And sound kind of, I just remember the first time like in college, someone introduced me to like Audacity, and like I had a project to do, and like I just stayed there all day working on it. It was fascinating. And like that moment where like you get the timing just right so that you can have that story flow like with sound, like it was addicting. Like I just wanted to add more and more and like get that timing right. I think that's kind of what led me down that path.
I love how all three of you, the way you talk about both your projects and why it's so deeply personal. It's like really profoundly personal in the way that all of you are talking about it. And I wonder if there's, I'm sure there are many of these moments, but could you share with us one moment in your life that sort of let you know, like you're on the right path? Like those beautiful divine signs that say, you're supposed to be right here. You're supposed to be doing this. Would you share one of those with us?
For me, this year, this crazy, wacky year. I was always sort of team and make sure you have your steady, secure job and then do your, your fun sound music stuff on the side. And the realization that like, what is steady, secure really? Nothing is nothing is nothing is unable to not be here tomorrow. That wasn't as eloquent as I like, but it's the truth. And so because, this year happened, it was like, well, I mean, might as well like pursue this thing that I actually really like to do fully and see what happens. And seeing how I guess it's maybe the passion that's behind it has helped to propel me further than I have been in the 7-8 years I've been working in audio, because this is the first time that I fully solely focused on my audio. Is kind of like, oops, what if I would have just done this from the start? But you can't think like that either. So oddly enough, this year was the year I was like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do from now on.
It's kind of related to sound, but last year when I had my festival season for my VR documentary, we went to Harlem for a festival there. And so I had to bring my headsets and set up in the lobby of the Magic Johnson Theater in Harlem. And I remember, just with my headset, hi, would you like to try this experience? How would you like to try this experience? And just watching people spin in a chair and just take in both the sound and the visuals. There was a young girl that came with her dad. And I remember, they asked, young Black girl, could I take a look at the film or whatnot? Her dad encouraged her. And I remember she put on the headset and put on her headphones. And as soon as she put on her headphones and she started spinning around, her face was like this, like, oh my gosh. And then there was another Black girl that came because she saw me with this like clunky headset. And she's like, look. And then she saw the young girl, and I kid you not, she stopped and she was like, Mom, I want to try that too. She's like, I want to try that too. Like, I don't know what's going on. I see one person with the headset in her hand and the other one spinning around and like with this look of glee on her face. I was like, what is she looking at? And she was like, I want to try it too. And so it just was such a moment that reminded me on both the sound and other aspects of my career that I've been very fortunate to be able to do what I do for a living. Sound for me is also my day job, at least up until the pandemic. And so it's like the thing that I love to do, and folks want to offer compensation for it. And it's also just that thing during the pandemic that come May, June, people realize like, oh, I actually do need someone to do sound and visuals because I don't have the capacity to do it. I don't want to do it, or this is why they exist to do this. So, but that was a really key moment that I remember.
Sorry, like I almost forgot I had to talk because I was just like enjoying listening to y'all's stories. I think one moment was I had a friend who was moving to Atlanta actually, and she's an actress, and so she had heard about this kind of like a conference of like a film conference or whatever. And she was going to drive down there for like the week or weekend. And I was like, I'll just come, like, I'll just tag along. Like, and I, it was like in a huge, like ballroom kind of room. There were like booths and like so many people there. And I remember I just happened to pass this woman and kind of hear, she was talking to someone else and kind of hear what she was saying to him. And I was like, this is fascinating. Like the what, like I just kind of stopped and like started listening more. And then like she kind of finished talking to this guy and they exchanged information. And then I was like, hey, like, I'm sorry, I was just like was listening to your project. And like, I think it's fascinating. And like, I think I just want to support you in whatever you need, whatever you need. Like, I'm a theater designer and you do film, but like, and so I don't know much, but if like you want to work with me, here's my information. And I love everything you're talking about. And she was like, okay, cool. And like, we just started talking and we hit it off. And like, I ended up helping her with like 2 short films and we just communicate really well. And like, she's now a dear friend. And like, it just was like one of those moments that I can't believe that like, I just happened to walk by her talking about, talking to someone. And that is the reason why I was able to work on that project and, you know, support her in her work. Yeah, and I feel like that was kind of one of the bigger ones. And then I guess like the most recent one was that I got an email about this Wingspace salon. And then like the other, and then I was like working on a show and the set designer on the show just like happened to mention like, oh yeah, I'm a member of this thing, this Wingspace thing. And I was like, they just emailed me like a couple days ago, like tell me more. And I was like, that timing is like those little things, they get to me. Like, so yeah. Yeah, it was great.
Those are signs. Those are given. Those are, I believe in that. I believe that all of these beautiful connections and the gift of seeing the inspiration that you were able to offer, you know, with that little girl. I mean, I just feel like those are the whispers that are telling us like, keep going. You can do it. Keep going. This is a dual question. This is a what inspires you question, tagged with how do you take something that like inspires you and like how does it transform into your work, right? So like if it's sort of like something that you're devising and making, like I'm inspired by this and then it became this and this is like how it got there, or it could be like, oh, these kinds of things inspire me and I didn't quite know how to figure this thing out, but then this inspired me and it helped me get to here. You know, however which way, I just feel like it's so helpful to think about how what inspires us makes it into the work or the process of making it into work. That I'm really excited to hear from you all.
I'm gonna say something really petty and then I'm gonna think about this question seriously and have an actual answer. But when you did send the what inspires you, I did think about this one time when I went to like an established theater, you know, like I was like, oh, like we're going to see a show here. And I heard like the worst sound design I had ever heard. And I was just like, oh, okay, I can be here. Like I could work here one day. That was fascinating. So I just wanted to say that was a really petty thing, but it did inspire me. I was like, I'm inspired right now. So to work harder so I can get to this place. But I will think about a more serious answer in just a second.
No, I appreciate the petty actually. I would say for me right now, and probably through the past, I don't know, 6 months, the socio-political climate and the comment section have been what have been inspiring the particular types of podcast work that I'm interested in producing, because I want to take away the comfort and the safety of one's keyboard when having to have difficult discussions. The White Angle podcast was all remote just because it was sort of so early in the pandemic. Everybody was like, I don't know what's happening. But the podcast that we recorded on location, I would not have done it if we were not able to figure out a safe way to do it in person, because sort of just the overarching theme, the whole point is people with different perspectives sort of commenting on various art practices and finding sort of commonalities between, you know, their different perspectives. That's, I think, as much as I can say. And so I wanted to find a way to demonstrate that, you know, in spite of how horrific all of the things feel sometimes, from watching the news to doom scrolling to just, I mean, man, just hearing how people talk, type to one another, the fact that, you know, prior to us, you know, coming into this session, being warned that, you know, we've been Zoom bombed before, but, you know, hopefully that won't happen. Like the fact that we still live in a society where all folks have to do is be so negative is something that really inspires me. And I just want to produce work that shows people like, y'all, we can have conversations. We don't all have to agree. We don't all have to come from the same perspective. And also, this is palatable. This isn't going to be something that's like a hard listen, because when we just take the time to make the space to do it, it's not that hard. So I hope to not be inspired by all of these things much this time next year. I'm sure we're all going to be like 100% kumbaya, right? But if not, I will continue to just to push to get people in the room, virtual or real, to just show that we can have these difficult conversations without being really nasty to each other. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Things that inspire me, Gothic horror, because it is not only the types of stories, but the way that it's just so wordy and over descriptive. It just paints the most beautiful pictures in your mind and in your ears. It's just Edgar Allan Poe, golden, love it. And then also music. I grew up listening to a lot of music from different genres and also from different countries. So I listened to, grew up listening to West and South African music, grew up listening to symphonic metal from Europe, grew up listening to Japanese rock music, grew up and still do listen to Korean pop music. But all of the different types of sounds, the visuals, how the artistic concepts come together, how they're performed, the entire package of it all. And the fact that for at least those genres that I mentioned, they're very, very theatrical. They're very theatrical and over the top. And so these are things that inspire me to continue to create and to see also like what new styles and techniques that I can pick up and try out.
Okay, serious answer. But also first, Ada, I'm gonna need to get a playlist from you because all of those genres, come on, yes. So kind of talking a little bit about two things y'all both mentioned, like music scores, movie music scores, you know, like every once in a while, I'll just go see a movie and like, I'll just be like, oh my goodness, like, did y'all hear that? Did you hear that? Like, that was fantastic. Surprisingly, the only one I can think of right now is when I went to go see Incredibles 2. I just remember being like, that was incredible. The music, the score. Yeah, so those really inspire me, kind of are pick me ups, I think, for me. In terms of like conversations I've had with friends and colleagues from this summer, and you know, the protests and the Black Lives Matter movement, is I've had a lot of conversations that about I fully like I'm like there to do the work and to have the conversations that are uncomfortable, and I also was interested in like talking to people and like and showing stories of just Black joy, like, or Black experiences that have nothing to do with trauma, you know. Like I talked to a lot of people who were just like so tired of seeing like violence on Black bodies, and like, and just like where's the story where it's just like Black joy nonsense. And recently, like, a lot of people have been talking about Jingle Jangle on Netflix, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm saving it. And but like it's just apparently just like it's just fun nonsense, and like more of that for Black people. And so like I think for me, that was really inspiring, and I was like, yes, I want that. I had a friend who was like, I want the like the Harry Potter, but for Black people, which, I'm starting to see come up in like, in books and like the YA novels, and so it's like, how do we get um, that and for all people of color and everyone feeling represented. And like, I just want to be there to help people tell those stories. Like, I'm always just like, you have a story to tell? What do I need to do? I'll do whatever you need. And so like, when I hear about that, that really gets me going. Yeah.
I love that so much. So in all of these amazing inspirations, what does it look like? I mean, I'm sure you have multiple ways this happens, but like, can you tell us about how these inspirations get like pulled into, woven into, integrated into the work that you make?
For in terms of Gothic horror, it helps to find ways to be able to be very descriptive and very specific about sound. Especially like reading through Edgar Allan Poe, like The Raven, Fall of the House of Usher. The poetic language, as lengthy as it is, it just inspires me to be very specific on types of sounds. What does water sound like? There's variety types. There's many different types of water: indoor water, outdoor water, rivers, lakes, sounds in caves versus sounds that are dripping in a cave. What is the specificity of the sound for that? For the various music genres I mentioned, the compositional structure for those songs and what's rhythmic, what's melodic, what's spoken, what's sung, what are improvised riffs, what is something that's very set. And then also for like a lot of the live music, dissecting the different pieces and the different instruments, like really listening and working to isolate each piece as I'm listening to it, to be able to just again train my ear to specificity. And then the other that I forgot to mention, cyberpunk and solar punk, looking at the technology in terms of like how to say, Afrofuturism is something that drives a lot of the work that I do with other people, and cyberpunk and solarpunk to me are, two sides of the same coin, where we have the high tech, low life that on the cyberpunk side, that as technology continues to advance, we still have this increasing divide between people. And so as I work in spatial audio and like other experimental technologies for sound and visuals and whatnot, always thinking about like what I'm like the tools that I'm using and also critiquing it, but also looking at thematically how that plays into compositions. So being able to heavily rely on found sounds, being able to find things that are outside recorded and not just like being able to find a wide range of like things that I find versus things that are like highly polished, being able to create sounds out of anything. And then the solar punk counterpart to that, creating imagine sustainable futures, and creating soundscapes that are not only like grotesque, but also gorgeous, and give people hope for a new future. So,
For me, I would say I look for ways to ground every conversation in a discussion about creative practice. Because even if it's a difficult conversation, if we lead with, what are your favorite books? What are your favorite movies? What are your favorite songs? Okay, now let's get to some of these tougher issues about race or gender or, inequity. It makes it easier to sort of peel back the layers and blossom into a difficult conversation versus just approaching people directly, I found. And so while speaking of, White Angle in particular, the inspiration for that particular podcast was I am horrified by all of this imagery that I'm seeing of Black death. But finding 3, white filmmakers, so I can be like, hey, can I talk to you about how badly I'm horrified by these images of Black death? It probably wouldn't have shaped up the way that it did. So saying, how can I figure out a way to, again, make this experience palatable, make it an experience that people, even if it's a little sticky to get into, there's something about starting with, okay, you're an artist. Yes, you're coming from different perspectives. You have different life experiences, but your point of common connection is that you are both artists. And we're going to start there. And then we're going to branch out into the tough stuff. And so far, no one has asked me to remove anything. Everyone signed release agreements, so I think we're good. But figuring out ways to continue to use creativity, use the arts as a way to sort of break through some of the stigmas and conversation that we have in society is something that I'm still very excited about. I think the weight of the problems of the world that we are going to be facing whenever this post-COVID life begins is going to require some incredibly creative solutions. And why not have creatives as a part of those conversations, right? Like, yes, we need medical people, we need politicians, we need lawmakers, we need creatives as a part of these conversations, because we can connect dots in ways that other people can't. And so that's how I sort of try to weave my inspiration into my work.
I feel like when I talked about the things that inspire me, they're kind of I mean, it does affect my work now, but I definitely feel like there are goals in them. Like there are things I'm striving for in the future and where I want like my career to go and like where my skills to go. So like music scores and movie music scores, I mentioned those. I'm not a composer, but I want to learn, and I have gotten really good at making soundscapes that are very lyrical and very musical, and I love doing that. But I would love to learn a bit more about composing. So like that's something that like I'm striving towards. And when I talked about the shows that inspire me, I just know that like those are the shows that I enjoy myself the most, that I find the most fulfilled when I'm working on shows that promote people of color, that promote stories that you often do not hear, people's experiences that you do not hear on the mainstream, like they don't hear usually that like growing up. Like I would love to spread those stories more. So knowing that, it's like I just am always looking to seek out how to support those stories. And then when I do, I just want to do it so well and specific to that story. And when I was working on Schoolgirls, like one of the moments where I was like, okay, I think I made the right choices was when I got a comment that someone heard someone say like, oh, I love this song in the show. And like every single song, everything, all the music that I had was Ghanaian artists. People had asked me like, oh, are you doing all these different West African? And I was like, I could, because, everyone kind of listens to everything, artists, music gets around. But I wanted like everyone in the audience to know, even if they weren't West African, like that this is Ghanaian music. Like this is coming from Ghana. Like this is not Nigerian. No, none of that. This is Ghana. We are in Ghana. And so like knowing that there was like a Ghanaian person being like, oh, I love this song. I was like, okay, good. Like this is y'all's music. You are very much represented fully right now in the show. And so like that is definitely what I strive to do in my work. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's so inspiring how, like, being a part of changing the culture is so much a part of how you are all thinking about making work, and what that's like, especially in rooms where you might be the only blank there, or now things are hopefully changing a lot more, like how can we move forward and change this more? And what is the kind of work that you're really excited for us to come back to? We've talked about like more representation, right? Like absolutely. And we're talking about, people are talking now about how, oh, when Broadway comes back, not to say that Broadway is the be all and end all, but when Broadway comes back, they're not going to be for a foreign visiting audience. They're actually going to have to think about the New York audience and what would that look like as a difference, right? So I'm just thinking about the ways in which we think about audience, the ways in which we think about the work, and in the things that come through what you want to work on, what in your visions are the things that come through that you're like, this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be working on? What excites you about the work that you can envision making with people?
I feel very awkward saying this because it is a room full of theater practitioners, but I think I'm at a place now where theater and I will take a bit of a break from each other until this passes. And it's been weird, like being able to speak in front of people and talk about coming from a theater background. It's like, so what are you doing in the theater? And I'm like, I don't know. But for me, something that I've realized recently is that when I came up in sound, when I mentioned like the Linux Laptop Orchestra and coming in, like learning about sound and video through like interactivity and programming, it was through a compositional lens. It was through music department and like really experimenting and pushing forms of sound. When I graduated, however, because I was not a classical composer, I found it very difficult to say, hello, I'm a composer. First of all, this is me. I look like me. And then it's like, you compose, you're not okay. Then you don't do classical, okay. And then it's like, here's experimental music, and it's like, usually white men do that. Like, what am I listening to? I'm very confused. And so I moved into sound design partially as a way to be able to collaborate with other people on storytelling and sound, and also as a means of survival. And so I'm at a place now where I'm, reading, I'm starting to read articles on sound again, books. Currently reading a book called Adventures in Sonic Fiction by Kojo Ishun. And like, I am at a place where like, I want to like shred sound and like take it apart again. Similar to how I did in the beginning. And I have my collaborations with people, and I have like continuing to experiment in VR, like being able to actually do spatial audio, because I don't get to do that often. But for theater, it's like, I'm getting emotional saying this. I just like, I don't know. I don't know if when we come back that there is space. I don't think there ever was space. I think we've crafted and shaped our space. But I feel like when we come back, like, I don't know, was this a phase of my life that, oh my God, was this a phase of my life that was important for me to set in a sound, like finding something that I love and seeing where it takes me? Because the truth is, like, my break from theater, or like wanting to explore other things, happened months before the pandemic, that I had sensed I was like, I need to just stretch and see more. So I think if I decide to come back to theater as an institution, I think I'm looking forward to new collaborations with people, finding new ways to tell stories, um, giving respect to digital theater. I'm tired of everyone making digital theater like it's just Zoom plays. It's not. It's more than that. It's a practice, and it's just that we are creating digital theater under the guise of a mass pandemic, and that is what we are doing. We are creating under a mass pandemic, and it's not just digital. There's so much more. But yeah, I don't know. I know that it's a core part of my practice. I know that it will always be. And I think in some shape or form, whether it's like podcasts or audio dramas or like regular theater shows, I think I'll always find ways to collaborate with other people. But in terms of the institution of theater and the way that we climb up in that social ladder, I mean, like, just to be real, I don't know. I have no idea. Sorry, I wish I could give a happier answer.
That's real. That's so real.
Definitely. And I feel like I have had very similar thing. Like, I'm going through a very similar thing, you know, like I know a lot of other people who are going through that as well. So, and like, do what you have to do. You know, but like, yeah, I'm still talking, but I don't know if I have an answer to the question. I also don't know if I even remember the question. Sorry. Maybe, man, if you could repeat it.
Of course. It's about what kind of things you would want to be done when we're back, that you would want to participate and collaborate in, you know, like in the ways in which things have been done. What is next? What do you envision that will be next that will actually take us into the future instead of perpetuate trauma on Black bodies? You know, what? Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, going off of the digital theater is more than Zoom plays. Yes, support that statement. And like watching people running theaters being like, oh, like this was actually kind of interesting. Like, we could just do this regularly when like working on an audio drama. Yeah, you could. Yeah, like this is a different way you can tell a story, this way to do theater. Like, I think that theater a little bit before COVID was realizing that it needed to change, but didn't know how, you know, that like with the world the way it is and technology, that like theater needed to adapt and explore and really be pioneers in like different in ways that you can tell stories differently, right? Like that is, I feel like, what our industry needs to be doing. And COVID kind of has pushed a lot of people and companies to be like, oh, we really need to adapt and fast. And I'm hoping that we can continue in that direction, and that we can continue to explore different ways to tell stories, and we can and not get and not revert back to what we were doing, you know, before. And I mean, honestly, in terms of like the work, I mean, I'm going through the same thing as I said before, that like, what will theater look like? Is that something I want to stay in? Or do I want to start doing something else and doing both. Like, like what other industries can I start working in? But I kind of am like more interested in how the industry will be running in terms of like how the industry, like what are our values in the theater industry? I think like, there was a lot of talk this summer, and like one of the things is like in the arts, I'm like, we need to pay our people, like pay people, like, like it's just like, it's simple as that. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know if you heard about the Grammys and Tiffany Haddish recently, and how the Grammys like contacted her to like host Grammys virtually, and they weren't going to pay her at first. And it was just like, even like you get to that high level and they're still like not going to pay people. Like, what does that? And I think it just like, I knew this, but it was a good reminder that like there's a lot of like fighting for our values in the art to get like to be like, I should be paid what I'm worth. Like I should be treated like well, like my skills and like knowing your worth and fighting for it. But like we shouldn't have to fight this hard, like, and it kind of hurts a little bit, like in an industry where we talk a lot about I mean, we just talk a lot about equity, and we talk a lot about, being allies. We talk a lot about social political stuff, and then our actions do not support that in our industry. And I think it hurts even more because we are talking about it. Like there are other industries that don't even talk about it. And so like you wouldn't expect more from them, like, but so like I think like I've been like thinking a lot about that, and I'm like, hoping that there is a movement when it comes to the theater industry, and that we should just be pioneers and change, and like whatever structures are not working for us, like we need to explore new structures, like we need to explore different ways to do things, because I mean, I just think that we're an industry that we could start that and then other industries can follow. Like, I think that's just like something that should just be happening everywhere. Yeah, sorry for that ramble.
Yeah. Oh, this is like group therapy a little bit. I think it's I don't know anyone in the industry, not even just, sound folks. Like everyone's kind of like, what is the world going to look like when we're back, whenever we're back, in particular in sort of a smaller to mid-size industry like in Atlanta. We have like a pretty, robust theatrical community, but it certainly isn't the level of like, the film community or even the music community. And so it's very small already. There was already sort of like everybody trying to grab to like get hold of their thing. And so with the possibility of not everyone making it past this time, not all of the companies reopening, not everyone staying in town, people moving, going different places, I'm very curious to see who continues in the industry, because as both of you pointed out, there is so much work. I mean, it's not just going to be, okay, we're back, let's do this production meeting. Like, no one is going to be able to run production meetings the way they did pre-COVID. No one is going to be able to talk to people and treat people and pay people the way that they did pre-COVID without knowing that they're going to be called out. They're going to be, it's fascinating. Do I want to be a part of that world rebuilding? I did this just for fun. This was my break from having to think about things. This was my, let me go to rehearsal and chill with these crazy people for a minute, do some Q lab. Like, it was like just a fun, light thing to do. And so thinking about that, I know for me, I am sort of heading down podcast land and enjoying it. But, theater is where sort of like I get that jolt. I love inviting my family and my friends to opening night and going to the, the reception and eating the cheese and the cheap wine. Like that's what we do it for. So I know that I will be most excited about working on shows that are a little bit dangerous. In fact, I have the sneaking suspicion a lot of companies are going to play it safe in terms of programming, because I think as a community, people are going to want to feel safe when they go back to the theater. I think we're going to see a lot of classics. I think we're going to see a lot of programming that's kind of, universal. But one of the shows that I was working on before, it got shut down was a show, Collective Rage, a play in 5 Bettys, which is like ultra mega feminist. I mean, you can bleep this out. They say like pussy, like every other word. I mean, it's just like happening. And I remember kind of sitting in rehearsal, like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to invite my mama to this one. This is kind of wild. And yet a few months later, Cardi and Megs drop WAP, and it's like, oh yeah, we're just doing it. And so if it's not a little bit dangerous, I don't think I'm going to be interested in working on it, because the thing that seems dangerous 3 months later, that's just what's happening now. So I'm hoping that, there's going to be indie work that still gets attention once we're able to reopen. I'm hoping that there's still going to be sort of experimental or challenging work that gets to be presented once we're able to open. And that's the work that I'm looking forward to supporting the most.
Thank you. Yeah, especially since we've been isolated and at home, like, may we be able to gather and have our imaginations fly, just like, come on, like, let's go. Let's bust out of all of these walls. I want to make sure that there is space for people to ask questions that are here with us. And I think Elizabeth and Mel sort of hold this space.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mei Ann, for being an incredible moderator. And thank you, Tosin, Espii, and Kacie. I'm really glad that I'm getting this chance to meet each and every one of you virtually and learn about your inspirational creative journeys. And the thing that struck me the most was that each of you have such incredible, unique voices, and you're also all multi-hyphenates, and you're owning the spaces that you're in, which is there's so much uncertainty the 3 of you talked about right now, and it's just but hearing your stories makes me so excited to for post-pandemic and the work that you're gonna be doing, and it just gives me a lot of hope for the future. Yeah. We have a little bit of time left together, so I think we want to open up the floor to everybody who's here with us. So, feel free to turn on your videos. It's going to be an open Q&A session. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand, turn on your video and raise your actual hand, or use your virtual hand, and then we can unmute you. And then I also want to say that we really want to use this space as an opportunity for younger women of color artists to connect and engage with each other, because spaces like that are so rare. So, if you don't identify this way, we just ask that you're mindful of who's taking space in the room and listen and give time and space for others. Mel, did we have any questions come up in the chat?
Yeah, I had one question come up sent to me from actually my student who's tuning in. Hi, Jason. Jason wanted me to pass on major compliments to all 3 of you and tell you how amazing your work is. So I'm doing that first. But the question that he had is, how do you adjust your processes for in-person versus virtual work? And do things like radio plays or podcasts demand anything specific?
I'll just say quickly, again, unfortunately, being present for the in-person project that I did was very difficult, because every 10 seconds I was looking to see how close everyone was to one another, and if such and such was wearing a mask, and okay, this is before we didn't know touching services wasn't that big of a deal, but I'm like, okay, who touched what? Where are the wipes? Where's the spray? It was just a very, it wasn't as fun as being able to just show up at a space and everybody high five and hug and sneeze on each other like how we used to do. So I will say that looking back on that experience, it's a little bit more of just a little bit more anxiety than I like with most creative processes. Virtual work for me has you know, even as someone who like after this panel, I'm going to go and like sit in silence and like just watch trash TV. Like I am a true introvert. I need that me time. And so having to do this so often has kind of strengthened that muscle. Having to do, you know, Zoom meetings all day for one thing, and then do a remote podcast recording session, and then be in a remote production meeting for another thing. I feel a little bit more energized about the virtual space right now than I do about being around people right now, which is really bizarre. Yeah.
For myself, because I've worked in hybrid physical and virtual spaces, working in this way all the time has been the real shift. But what I would say is that I divide my day into thirds. And so at least a third of that day has to be in silence. I'm realizing that because I'm not around people physically, I am in headphones a lot, and I'm here, you know, especially when you're editing radio plays, like you're hearing a lot of people talking in your ear for hours. And then in terms of sound effects and stuff like that, the example I said earlier, like fishing through however many different types of water, specificity of it. And so when I work in other studios recording audiobooks, we have our day cut up into 4-hour sessions. And so I've taken that practice and I've adapted it to home. Somewhere in there is a nap, because I love naps. Somewhere in there is a snack, because I love snacks. And part of that, the rest of the hours, if it's not a morning session, afternoon or evening session, is I just sit in silence and I stare at the ceiling. I kid you not, my mom calls me and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just staring at the ceiling." She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, yeah. Just need to not hear anything for a bit. I'll even, I have to get back in, well, now it's cold, so I can't do it anymore, but taking walks outside, I take sound walks to refresh and retune my hearing. So for me as a regular sound practice, but especially now to just wash out and reset. And especially during all of the protests that happened this summer and the subsequent fireworks, I don't care what anybody tells me, that was very strange. The whole 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. fireworks. Since then, especially, I've had to carve out chunks of just, I must hear nothing. I want nothing, like just the ambient sound, and just take that in, and then I can be able to work.
Since audio dramas and doing more digital work is new for me, at one point I very much underestimated how much time it would take, and I had overbooked myself and was like constantly on my computer for like 2 weeks straight. Like I wouldn't move, like go to sleep, wake up, my computer was still there, just open it up and just start again until I was extremely hungry, and then get up, eat, maybe do something, and then like go back until wee hours and like go back to sleep and do the same thing over and over again. Like that was like me for like 2 weeks. And it was like, it took such a toll. So thank you, Espii, for talking about your process, because since then I have definitely realized like, oh, like I now understand how much time things take, and I understanding that like I cannot be in front of my laptop editing for that much amount of time. And so like understanding like how to take chunks and how to restart and stuff like that, very new for me, because I'm used to just being in the room, right, and being in theater. And I think that's a big thing also that's so different, is that like usually when I am building and like making decisions, I'm in a room with other people, and I can just be like, listen to this, what do you think? Or like, you know, there's that collab, like, you know, how does that pair up with this? Like, let's just try it out right now. And like that collaboration and being able to talk to people. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm making the thing right now with just me and my laptop, and I'm like, I could do it this way or that way, and I have no one to talk to. Like, it's like just me. And so I just kind of had to learn to be like, just pick one and move on, and then send it and then get feedback, like it was an adjustment, but I'm starting to learn from it and love it as well. It's different, but it's good.
Yeah, that's real. Great answers. Thank you. Are there questions from any other folks?
I think Edward had a question in the chat. Any advice for college students interested in sound design other than watching a video of the salon?
For me personally, assisting was really helpful for me. Just it would get me in the room, and it would get me. I would meet so many people through that, and it's crazy. Just like, even if I didn't do much work, if people like you, they're like, and you come with a sound designer that they trust, they'll just be like, okay, we'll call you. Like, it's really like, it really is that, like, and so it's great for networking. And then also I mean, I just got to sit there and watch how people work and pick up all these little things, right? I didn't go to school for sound designing specifically. I just had like a theater degree, and there wasn't even like a designated sound professor, or they had like a sound design class like once every other year, and it wasn't for just theater students, so it was kind of like a very like low basic degree that anyone on campus could come take. So there just wasn't a lot. Like I very much got up all my experience through like internships or just like going and doing things, and so that's just how I learned, and it's gotten me. It's been good. It's been good. It's gotten me to a certain place, and I've liked that.
For me, when I was in college, the way I ended up picking a project, there was one professor in the theater department that was focused on sound, and the advice that they gave me was, think of a story. Think of your like favorite myth or folktale, or fable, and find free sounds online, and then to like map out the particular points in the story, and then create, without words, create a sonic escape for that, and find ways to make transitions between them to make a complete story. I went through that about 2 or 3 times in college, like trying to like think of what kind of project to do. There are sounds that you can find online. Despite what people say, there are sounds you can record on your phone. You can always like find ways to be able to tweak it to make it as robust as you want, but ways to be able to do that. I mentioned sound walks before, going to particular locations where there are, well, I don't know anymore if there are people, or without people, or if they're animals, or lack of, but really fun, tuning your ears to be able to listen around you and to be able to hone in and focus on things. And if you like have, if you have like favorite stories, favorite poems, things that that you don't have to like look up too much on what the story is, to be able to just sketch out different things and pretend there is dialogue, and to just be able to sketch that out. That was the advice that I was given. And so I'd like to pass it to you too.
Very quickly, I am team fake it till you make it. I say if you don't have it already, download Audacity, download another free DAW, download a bunch of free sound effects, and start telling people that you are a sound designer and you're open to working on projects. There are so many things that I've gotten myself into just by being like, yes, I can do that. No experience, no idea what I was doing. But I mean, work ethic, really wanting to do it, showing up. I mean, I don't know, your personality, being the funny guy helps. You be that. Like, I am a sound designer. You are a sound designer now. You are anointed. Go work and be happy, my friend.
Yeah, being just like a likable person goes such a long way. Like, people are just like, just being a person that people want in the room, like, it's like most of the work right there.
Yeah, and if you like, you know, like Kacie said, if you find, you know, free sounds, find your DAO, and just be able to like make your own sketches in the meantime as you're finding stuff. That being able to those three different pieces that I had mentioned that I like went through each round, that was my sound reel for the longest time. And it is still part of my sound reel because people are like, "Wow, that's so fascinating. Who'd you do it for?" I'm like, it wasn't for anyone else's. It was for myself. But yeah, just to be able to put things together, put it in your reel. As soon as you do something for someone else, put it in your reel. Continue to be like, yes, I can do this, and this. Document, keep everything, and yeah, continue to explore, experiment.
Thank you all for sharing that encouraging, practical, and humorous advice. So we're at time for the evening and wanting to be respectful of everyone's time. I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and really thank our lovely panelists, Tosin, Espii, and Kacie. Thank you so much for gracing us with your time and yourselves and your work. And thank you so much to Mei Ann for moderating a wonderful conversation and holding this space with us. This little thing before we end the evening, I'd like to invite us, if you have other women of color sound designers that you love and admire, to just shout them out. You can put their name in the chat. You can say their name out loud. I'll start. The people I can think of right now are Knock and Alicia, and whoever wants to, I don't know, Tosin, Kacie, or any of you have people that you have in mind.
I just dropped one in the chat, Imole Sankofa. She was actually one of the first people for my podcast pilot back in January. Dope designer, dope composer. Check her out.
Unfortunately, yes, unfortunately, which is why I'm really happy to be here and meet more sound designers of color. But I only know one person, and it's this woman named Ashley in Atlanta, and we've never met in person. So.
The Kumaru is more in the land of sound artists, more so than like sound designer for theater, but they create a lot of ambient soundscapes. So I'm just putting the link there.
And I'm seeing Twee and Bailey and How By. Yeah. As Mel said, thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to our panelists and our moderator. I want to drop into the chat. If you enjoyed the salon, please consider supporting Wingspace and sign up for our mailing list to hear more about events. Follow us on social media. I think tonight's salon wraps up an amazing year of 20 virtual salons for Wingspace. So thank you so much for being with us, and we really look forward to seeing you in 2021. Yes, Rasil, Ashley. Thank you, everyone. Keep in touch. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.